Why don't I speak French? And why do I speak Spanish? So, many people know I am Canadian. And I don't know who teaches this in the rest of the world, but people seem to think that all Canadians speak English and French. So, first things first. That is not true. Now, I believe the reason many people think that all Canadians speak English and French is because they know that Canada is a bilingual country. So, quickly, what does that actually mean in reality? Why is Canada bilingual? So, Canada is bilingual because now, I'm not going to go into all the details, but basically, basic history of Canada was that there were two trading companies, fur trading companies. The main fur that they traded, that they wanted from Canada, was beaver. The one company, the Northwest Company, I believe that's the name, was French or controlled by the French. I believe it was also very decentralized. And then the second company was the Hudson Bay Company. If you've ever been to Canada, you might have seen the big department store called HBC or Hudson Bay Company. And yes, that is the same Hudson Bay Company which more or less founded Canada. So we had these two companies, French Fur Trading Company and English Fur Trading Company. And they were rivals. Sometimes when they met each other in the wilderness of Canada, they would fight and sometimes kill each other. So it was a very intense rivalry. So basically, since the beginning of Canada, there have been the French and the English. Now, I can't remember the exact year, but there basically was a war in Canada. I'm gonna say in the 1800s for now. There were a lot of changes in the world when Napoleon took control over France. So I believe it was during the Napoleonic era that this war occurred between the English and the French in Canada. And during this war or battle, again, I'm just giving you the basic details. I'm an English teacher, not a historian. But the English won this battle. And the English, being somewhat intelligent, they realized it was probably not a good idea to try to force the French to stop speaking French and start speaking English. So what the English did to keep the French happy and basically make peace between the two different cultures was say, hey, Frenchies, we don't want any problems. We beat you, we whooped your ass in this war, but yeah, we don't want any problems. We don't want future problems with you. And you guys have a good thing going over here in Quebec. We don't really want to ruin what you guys have going on by imposing our ideas, our culture, our language onto you. So how about this? You're going to be part of this territory because if you don't know, Canada didn't officially become a country until 1982, even though it was more or less a country in 1867, but it didn't become an official country with its own constitution until 1982. But yes, the English basically said, you're going to be part of this territory. At that time, I don't know if it was called the Territory of Canada, the Colony of Canada. I can't remember what the official name of it was for the British. They were the rulers of Canada at that time. But they said, do whatever you want. So you guys can have your own laws. You guys can keep speaking French. French, of course, are more Roman Catholic than Protestant. So I also said you guys can keep on practicing your Catholic religion in Quebec. We don't want you to change at all. The only thing that we ask is that you behave yourselves, pay taxes, and you try to participate in this colony, right? So in 1982, when Canada basically received its own constitution from the British, they wanted to enshrine basically these two cultures into the constitution, and basically saying that in Canada there are two cultures. There is the French culture, which is mostly in Quebec, but also a little bit in places like New Brunswick, and the English culture, which is the majority of Canada. And with this enshrined in the Constitution, Canada became a bilingual country. But again, what does that mean? Basically, it just means that French language rights are protected in the Constitution. And that also means that if I go to a post office or I get on a plane in Canada, if I am French or I speak French, I have the constitutional right to receive service in French. And yes, all Canadian government documents must be in English and French by law. Even if, for example, I'm in Alberta. Now, of course, in Alberta, for example, we don't really, the provincial government documents aren't all in English and French. But yes, if it's the federal government or involved with or part of the federal government, the documents will be in both English and French, or you can ask for the documents in English or in French. And that also means that all products in Canada must be in English and French. Even if I'm in Alberta, for example, where hardly anybody speaks French, the products will still have English and French. And that's basically what it means, bilingualism in Canada. It just means that the Constitution protects the French and the English language. And it means that anybody who speaks French can basically get French service anywhere in Canada if the service has to do with the federal government, or if they are French, they can make sure that they understand the ingredients of a product, because that's the way it is in Canada. Now, in reality, I would say most Canadians aren't bilingual. Most Canadians speak either just French or they speak just English. So for example, if you go to Quebec, you go to any city, any town, most people just speak French. Even though they're in Montreal, for example, most people are bilingual. And I would say the only real bilingual place in Canada would probably be Montreal, and maybe also Ottawa, because if you don't know, the capital of Canada is Ottawa, and Ottawa is right on the border of Quebec and Ontario. And so yeah, there's a very large French speaking population near Ottawa, and of course all federal government officials must speak French and English. Most of them, at least, must speak French and English. So if you want to experience Canadian bilingualism, you can only really do it in Ottawa or Montreal. But in Quebec, for example, almost everybody is monolingual. They just speak French, except for people in except for people in Montreal. They speak English and French. As for the rest of Canada, everybody speaks English, right? So, for example, where I'm from, everybody spoke English. There was a small French-speaking community, so they were bilingual. At the same time, most people, the majority people in my town, in my province, just spoke English. So the first reason I don't speak French is because in my province, we don't speak French. It's that easy. So when I was growing up, all I ever heard was English, 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 English. And a lot of people are a bit confused by this. They say, well, don't you guys learn French in school? Some schools, yes, they do teach French. If they do teach French, the classes are incredibly basic. They're basically like the English classes in many parts of the world. They're crap. They're crap classes. You don't really learn that much. You might learn how to conjugate être in French, and you might learn a few words. But besides that, you really don't learn that much. They're really horrible language classes. And many schools just don't have the option. So for example, in my public school in my town, there was no option for learning French. So there were no French classes at all. There were no French classes in elementary school. There were French classes in middle school. I took 1 semester of French in middle school, and again, the classes were horrible. Horrible classes. Horrible language classes. Yeah. And in high school, yeah, there were no French classes. No French classes at all. So if you were lucky, you went to a Catholic school, or you went to a bilingual school where they taught French and English, then yeah, you could learn French. But for a majority of the people in my province, they just learned English. Now, this could be the end of the video, but no, it's not, because I did take French classes in university. Now, the question you might be wondering is why? Why did I take French classes in university? 2 reasons. First reason is that if you go to university, like in many universities in the world, they ask you to take at least a couple of courses of languages in order to get your degree. So I believe I went to the University of British Columbia, and I can't remember, I think I need to get 6 or 12 credits of some sort of language in order to get my degree. So I chose French, and the reason I chose French for my language credits was because I was studying political science, and my main goal for going to university and studying political science was to become some sort of politician, bureaucrat, diplomat in the federal Canadian government. And I already talked about this quickly, but yes, if you want to become a federal politician, if you want to become prime minister or an important minister in the cabinet of the prime minister, then you need to know French, right? And even if you just want to become a really, really important bureaucrat and make lots of bureaucrat dollars, get a bureaucrat pension, then yeah, you're going to have a higher chance of getting that if you speak English and French. So my main goal was to learn French in order to improve my chances of getting into the federal government and becoming a diplomat, a bureaucrat, or a politician. But I was a little bit disappointed in university because I soon realized that political science really isn't a degree that teaches you how to become a fantastic bureaucrat or diplomat. In other countries, for example, like Russia, if you study something like political science, it might have a different name over there, but they do teach you the skills you need in order to become a fantastic government bureaucrat or a fantastic diplomat. And yes, for that reason, Russian diplomats are famous for their professionalism. Of course, I just said that. Many people are going to say that Russians are barbarians and horrible people, but I do believe that Russian diplomats are some of the best in the world. You may not support the Russian government, but for me, it's really hard to deny that Russian diplomats aren't some of the best diplomats in the world. Same goes for the Chinese. If a Chinese person wants to study political science, it might have a different name in China, but yes, they will be taught how to become a diplomat or a bureaucrat, and they get the professional skills they need in order to enter that career. In Canada, it's not really like that. In Canada, political science just teaches you a whole bunch of ideology, and they teach you how to write essays. They treat it as if it's a science, but it's not really a science. So I was incredibly disappointed about this. So that made learning French less desirable for me, because after about a year, 2 years in university, I realized that I really didn't want to be a part of the government, and especially because this degree really wasn't getting me prepared to enter the government in any way, shape, or form. And also at that time, I met a Mexican girl. I do believe I have a video about it. If I do have a video about it in simple English, it'll be appearing right here. So I met her, and she introduced me to the Mexican culture and the Latin American culture, and I just fell in love with that culture and with Spanish. So I started taking Spanish classes, and I found that learning Spanish was much easier than learning French. So why didn't I like learning French? There's a few reasons. First reason is people that learn French, and also just French people in general, are a little bit snobbish. Now, I'm a very simple Canadian from the countryside, and one of the things that simple Canadians from the countryside hate more than anything else in the world are snobbish people. We're very down-to-earth people, and the French really aren't down-to-earth people. They're very head in the clouds people, I would say. And the people who learn French and love French are also those kinds of people. They're very head in the clouds, weird, strange ideologies. The French, for example, were more or less the ones who created postmodernism, whether it was Foucault or Corbusier. So a lot of really crazy ideas and ideologies were created by the French, because they're not really down-to-earth people. They're more head in the clouds, let's try out this crazy idea people. So that really turned me off. The other students that were studying French with me, they weren't horrible people, but again, they just seemed very snobbish. They weren't very open. They were like, I'm learning French. I'm a special person. People who don't know French aren't as special. They aren't as intelligent. And I really don't like that attitude. And my professors also had the same attitude. I had a whole bunch of professors that were like 60 years old, 70 years old, really old Frenchies. And yeah, they had the attitude of, I am going to teach you the French grammar. I do not care if it is boring. If you do not like learning the French grammar, then you can go away. I do not need to deal with you, you regular English scum. So I had this attitude that I really didn't like. I did have one teacher who taught me French. She was a young girl. She was a postgraduate student. She was from New Brunswick, I believe. She's from some part of Canada where they speak English and French. And yeah, she was a bit more down to earth. I did enjoy her classes a lot more than the stuck-up 60-year-old, 70-year-old French professors. So yeah, the classes were incredibly boring because they really focused on grammar all the time. It wasn't until my fourth course of French where we started to really open a book and look at French literature and do readings in French, and I did enjoy that. But yeah, my first 3 courses of French were just all grammar from a textbook and learning lists of vocabulary, and I really didn't like it. They really didn't teach much about the culture. Again, the French aren't really the best at promoting their culture. They're very, we have the best culture in the world. If you don't like it, then screw you. We don't need you. We're better than you anyways. Which Who knows? Maybe it's true, but it's not really an attitude which is going to attract people to learn the language. And on the other hand, in my Spanish classes, the professors were incredibly warm, incredibly open. They wanted to teach you about the culture. I had a Mexican professor, a Brazilian professor, Spanish professor, so a professor from Spain, and they all did a really good job of really interacting with the students. Whenever they were curious about the culture, they would talk about it. During the classes, they would, again, talk about the culture, talk about differences. The classes were much more interactive. So even though I would say the methodology wasn't that different from the French classes, we still used a textbook, and the textbook had grammar and vocabulary. I found that the textbooks did a much better job of just expressing the culture, explaining the culture, and the professors did a good job of also doing the same thing, expressing the culture, describing the culture of the Hispanic speaking world. I do believe the French have an interesting culture. The culinary culture in France seems very interesting. But yeah, the professors, they never talked about it. They never talked about wine. They never talked about cheeses. They never talked about food. They never talked about music. Well, they did a little bit, but not that much. Whereas with my Spanish professors, they had no problems talking about food, talking about music, talking about drinks, talking about culture. And that really hooked me onto Spanish. Yeah, but with French, I was never hooked on French just because of that French snobbish attitude. So that is the main reason why I don't speak French. So in conclusion, in summary, I don't speak French because, one, I come from a part of Canada where nobody speaks French. Well, some people speak French, but not that many. And two, in university, I didn't enjoy my French classes. The professors were snobbish, and the other students were also a little bit snobbish. Whereas with Spanish, the professors were incredibly warm, incredibly welcoming, and the other students were also very chill and laid back. And maybe to finish this off, it might be a bit surprising for people, but in schools nowadays, I learned this from an elementary school teacher that was taking salsa classes with me at the time, and I overheard her talking about how in Calgary, so Calgary is the biggest city in my province, and I think it's the fourth biggest city in Canada. They're actually, most students are learning either Chinese or Spanish as a second language and not French, because there are a lot of Chinese immigrants in Canada, and also China is a lot more important nowadays than France or Quebec. So for that reason, many students were learning Chinese, or they're learning Spanish because, yeah, many Canadians in the wintertime, they'll go to Mexico, they'll go to the Dominican Republic, they'll go to Cuba on vacation. So it just makes sense to learn Spanish so that you can enjoy future vacations in Latin America. And of course, slowly we're getting more and more Latin American immigrants in Canada. So yeah, again, it makes sense to learn Spanish. It's one of the most, well, it's I think it's the second? No, I can't remember. It's either I think it's the second or the third most spoken language in the world. So it just makes sense to learn it so you can speak to more than, I don't know, 600 million people that speak Spanish. I don't know the exact numbers, but a lot of people speak Spanish compared to French, which is one of the more widely spoken languages in the world, but it's not as widely spoken as Spanish. So yes, in many parts of Canada right now, many people are either learning Chinese or Spanish as a second language in elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and even universities. And French has probably become now the third most taught language in Canada. So might be interesting for you to know that. And that's it for now. So, was all that information new for you? If it was new for you, then let me know down below in the comments. Let me know what you thought about bilingualism in Canada before this video. Yeah, of course, what you learned from this video. And yeah, any questions you have about this topic or about Canada, let me know, and I might make a simple English video for you. And of course, by listening to this, hopefully your English has improved just a little bit more. That's the main point of these videos, to give you more vocabulary, give you listening practice, and of course by listening your pronunciation will improve as well. So hopefully we achieve that goal in today's video. And that's it. Thank you for listening if you've listened till now, and I'll see you soon, my dear student. Bye.